There was a night when an empire held its breath. A night when silence became heavier than stone, when the air itself seemed charged with something unseen, something unstoppable. A night when one simple mark on a doorway made the difference between devastation and deliverance. Have you ever imagined standing inside a house, waiting, knowing that history was about to split in two? Have you ever wondered what it feels like when destiny approaches your street, when judgment walks past your walls, when everything depends on whether you believe the instruction given? This is not just an ancient narrative buried in religious tradition. This is a story that still echoes across centuries, and before this message ends, you will understand why that night still speaks directly to you. Egypt was not merely a nation. It was a symbol of power, structure, dominance, and control. Its monuments rose toward the heavens as declarations of permanence. Its ruler was considered divine. Its systems seemed untouchable. Within that powerful empire lived a people who did not belong to it in heart, though they were bound to it in labor. Generations had been born into limitation. Fathers passed down not land, not freedom, but survival. Mothers sang lullabies under the shadow of oppression. The Hebrews had grown accustomed to waiting. Waiting for change, waiting for relief, waiting for something that seemed distant and impossible. But history does not move only by human hands. There comes a moment when heaven intervenes. And when that moment arrives, no empire is strong enough to resist it. Through a reluctant leader named Moses, a message was delivered. Release the people. What followed were signs that shook the confidence of a civilization, events that disrupted normal life, occurrences that challenged every assumption of control. Each sign was not merely a display of power, but a warning, an invitation to reconsider pride, an opportunity to change course. Yet the ruler's heart remained unyielding. How often does power blind itself? How often does pride refuse to bend, even when evidence stands directly in front of it? Then came the announcement that would define everything. A final declaration, a decisive night, a moment after which nothing would be the same. But alongside the warning came a precise instruction for the Hebrew families. Each household was told to select a lamb. Not just any animal, but one without defect, healthy, carefully examined, observed over several days. This was not random selection. It required attention, intention, participation. At the appointed time, that lamb would be prepared according to the instructions given. And then came the detail that would determine the outcome. A visible mark was to be placed on the doorframe of each house. A clear sign. A public declaration of obedience and trust. The promise was direct. When the sign was seen, judgment would pass over that house. Pause and reflect on that statement. Not when perfection is seen, not when strength is measured, not when reputation is evaluated, when the sign is seen. The outcome depended not on personal merit, but on response to instruction. It depended on faith expressed through action. As the sun lowered on that historic evening, tension settled over the Hebrew community. This was not an ordinary dinner. They were instructed to eat fully dressed, sandals secured, staff in hand, ready to move, ready to leave, ready for transition. Who eats a final meal in anticipation of freedom that has not yet visibly arrived? Who prepares for departure while still standing in bondage? Only those who trust the promise before the evidence appears. Children may have asked questions. Why tonight? Why this way? Why this sign? Parents likely answered with conviction mixed with emotion. Because we were told to trust. Because we were given away. Because obedience matters. Meanwhile, in other homes, life likely continued with normal rhythms. conversations, plans, assumptions about tomorrow. And isn't that how it often happens? Some sense that something is shifting. Others remain unaware, certain that routine guarantees stability. Midnight approached. No drum roll announced it. No visible storm marked the hour. Yet the moment arrived exactly as declared. Across Egypt, a profound disruption unfolded. A wave of grief moved from house to house, where no sign had been placed. The firstborn in those homes did not awaken to see the morning. From the palace to the simplest dwelling, the impact was universal. But when the unseen presence reached a doorway, marked according to the instruction, it did not enter. It did not cross the threshold. The sign was sufficient. A substitute had already been offered in that household. The cost had already been acknowledged. The mark spoke louder than circumstance. Can you imagine the contrast? In one home, overwhelming sorrow. In another, trembling relief. In one, unanswered confusion. In another, stunned gratitude. What separated them? Not geography, not education, not social class. A visible sign of obedience. That night exposed a principle that transcends time. Judgment may move through a land, but provision precedes it. A way is given before consequence arrives. A choice is presented before destiny unfolds. Inside the marked homes, silence must have been intense. Parents holding children, listening, waiting, and when the hours passed and no tragedy entered their space, realization dawned. The promise was true. The instruction was trustworthy. Faith had not been misplaced. But the night was not only about preservation, it was about transition. Before sunrise, the ruler who had resisted for so long sent word. Go, leave, take your people, and depart. What generations could not achieve through effort occurred in a single night of fulfillment. Liberation followed obedience. Yet, consider this carefully. Freedom began before departure. Freedom began when the sign was applied. Deliverance started in the act of trust. The Exodus did not begin at the city gate. It began at the doorway. This story is not merely historical documentation. It is layered with meaning. The lamb without defect represents innocence offered in place of another. The sign represents applied faith. The passing over represents mercy in the presence of justice. Centuries later, the imagery would gain even deeper understanding. Another lamb would be identified, examined, declared without fault, offered publicly. And once again, the message would center on trust, response, and visible faith. But let us remain in that Egyptian night for a moment longer. What if a family hesitated? What if they believed internally but failed to apply the sign externally? Would intention alone have been enough? The narrative suggests otherwise. Instruction required action. Faith required expression. This challenges modern thinking. Many prefer private belief without outward commitment. But that night teaches that unseen conviction must translate into tangible obedience. Imagine a father standing before his doorway, applying the mark with hands that trembled. Perhaps he wondered, will this truly protect us? Perhaps doubt whispered, what if this is unnecessary? Yet he proceeded. And that decision defined his family's future. There is another dimension. Warning preceded consequence. The message was clear. No one could claim ignorance. The opportunity to respond was given. This reveals something essential about divine justice. It is never impulsive. It is announced. It is explained. It allows for decision. Now shift your focus to the morning after. Hebrew families stepped outside their homes. The air felt different. The weight of bondage had shifted. Instructions were given quickly. Prepare to leave. Gather belongings. Move forward. What had been promised for generations was unfolding in real time. Children who had only known limitation now walked toward open space. Parents who had labored without ownership now marched toward possibility. And all of it traced back to a doorway marked in obedience. The empire that once appeared immovable was shaken. The system that claimed permanence proved temporary. And this is another lesson. No earthly structure is ultimate. No power is final. When heaven declares change, resistance collapses. But do not miss the deeper application. Every generation faces its own midnight moments. Moments when decisions matter more than emotions. Moments when instruction is given before clarity arrives. Moments when trust must act before results appear. What defines your doorway today? What visible evidence demonstrates your response to what you believe? Are you waiting for certainty before obedience, or are you willing to trust the instruction? This narrative does not promote fear. It promotes awareness. It does not glorify tragedy. It reveals provision. It does not celebrate disruption. It highlights mercy. The difference between devastation and deliverance was not human effort, but divine instruction embraced. The lamb chosen days before became central to survival. Relationship preceded revelation. Attention preceded action. Consider the psychological weight of that evening meal. Eating while knowing something historic was imminent. Eating in readiness. Eating with expectation. That posture reflects a mindset of anticipation. They believed that the end of one season meant the beginning of another. Sometimes liberation requires preparation before confirmation. Sometimes you must pack before you see the path. Sometimes obedience unlocks doors you cannot yet visualize. Let me ask you something directly. If your defining midnight arrived tonight, what sign would be visible on your life? What evidence would reveal that you trusted what you were told? Would your confidence rest in your achievements, your morality, your status, or in the provision made available to you? The marked doorway was public. Neighbors could see it. It was not hidden. Faith was not silent. It declared itself. There is also this truth. The substitute mattered. The lamb's role was not symbolic decoration. It represented cost. Freedom is never empty. Deliverance carries weight. Something stands in place of something else. As dawn spread across Egypt, history pivoted. What began as a night of tension became a morning of movement. Slaves became travelers. Oppression became memory. Promise became direction. And yet, the story continues to speak because it reflects universal patterns. Pride resists. Warning is given. Instruction follows. Choice is made. Outcome unfolds. Where do you stand in that sequence today? Perhaps you feel as though you are inside your own Egypt, restricted, limited, confined by circumstances. Perhaps you have heard a message of change but hesitated to act. Perhaps you are waiting for visible confirmation before committing fully. The ancient narrative invites a different approach. Respond first. Trust the instruction. Apply the sign. Prepare for movement. This is not about ritual. It is about relationship. Not about tradition, about trust. Not about external conformity. About internal conviction expressed outwardly. And here is the mystery that keeps this story alive. The same principle echoes forward. The concept of a lamb without defect. The idea of substitution. The power of applied faith. The passing over of judgment where trust is visible. The question is not whether midnight exists in life. It does. The question is whether you respond before it arrives. If this message is resonating with you right now, pause and reflect. What is God asking you to apply to your doorway? What instruction have you heard but delayed? What decision stands between you and a new season? Do not dismiss this as distant history. It is a mirror. It reflects patterns that repeat in personal lives, families, communities, and nations. Freedom often begins quietly, not with spectacle, but with obedience. Not with applause, but with action. And now I want to speak directly to you. If you sense that this story carries meaning for your life, do not scroll away casually. Engage with it. Type the word "ready" in the comments if you are prepared to trust before seeing. Tell me where you are watching from. Share this message with someone who feels trapped in their own Egypt. Subscribe if you want deeper explorations of powerful biblical narratives that challenge and inspire. Turn on notifications so you do not miss what comes next. Because this is more than content. It is confrontation. It is invitation. It is awakening. That night in Egypt proved something eternal. Provision is offered before consequence falls. Mercy is extended before judgment completes its course. Instruction is given before destiny crystallizes. The Lamb was chosen. The sign was applied. The promise was fulfilled. And the same principle stands today. When the decisive moment arrives, what will be visible on your doorway? History has recorded the night. The instruction has been given. The choice, now as then, belongs to you.